right, so now we know how to make alcohol with a lot of flavor, or maybe not so much flavor. And since 1909, no matter what still you are using, you can make Scotch whiskey. The rules also say that you have to bottle it at least 40% ABV or 80 proof, and it has to be aged 3 years in Scotland, and while aging, that has to happen in oak. So how do we classify Scotch? Well, these are our classifications. If it is the product of a single distillery, using only malted barley and distilled only in pot stills at least twice, you have a single malt whiskey. Now, if you have a single distillery that's making a whiskey from malted barley and other grains, usually in a continuous still, now you have a single grain whiskey. If you have a blend of 2 or more single malts from multiple distilleries, this is a blended malt whiskey. So these are also pot still only. Now, if you have a blend of 2 or more grain whiskeys from multiple distilleries, this is a blended grain whiskey. Now we have our dominant category, blended whiskey, where you have 1 or more malt whiskeys with 1 or more grain whiskeys from wherever in Scotland gives us blended whiskeys. Now, with regard to the grains, these are usually corn, rye, or wheat. But again, across all of these, the enzymes must come from barley. Now, a quality blend may be up to half single malts, and a lower quality may be down to only 10% malt whiskey. Now to discuss the regions. There are 5 legal regions, but it's very important to know that style and production techniques are not mandated in any of these. So a regional designation can imply a style, but it's not guaranteed. That said, there are some traditional methods, primarily the use of peat and briny iodine character from salt air with the drying barley, that you should know about. Now, the Highlands is the largest region. It stretches from the Orkney Islands in the north all the way down to the Isle of Arran in the south. And the Highland region takes in all the Northern Isles and most of the Inner and Outer Hebrides. Argyll, Stirlingshire, Arran, parts of Perthshire and Aberdeenshire too. Now, the vast landscape of the Highlands gives way for equally varied flavors and aromas, everything from salty spray coasts to heather-covered landscapes and everything in between. There's also a handful of Highland distillers that use a peated malt, like Ardmore. This is where Glenmorangie is as well. Now, the Islands is not a separate region as yet. It's included into the Highlands at the moment, but you can expect this to change before too long. Now we have Speyside. This region takes its name from the River Spey, which runs through the area and around which the majority of the distilleries are built. This is the most densely populated whiskey region in the world and home to more than half of all the distilleries in operation in Scotland. This is the spiritual home of Scotch. Aberlour, Balvenie, Benromach, Glenallachie, Glen this, Glen that, Macallan, Tom Dew, and all those guys are all in Speyside. Then we come into the Lowlands, which is the southernmost part of Scotland, covering much of the south, including Edinburgh and over to Glasgow. This was once the industrial home of whiskey production, but there's really only now a handful of distilleries in the lowland region, like Auchentoshan. Then we have Campbelltown, which is the smallest with just 3 distilleries. This is where Springbank comes from. And then there's Islay, known as the Queen of the Hebrides due to her fertile land. Islay was traditionally the perfect place for whiskey distillation due to the ready supply of barley and peat. Ardbeg, Laphroaig, Lagavulin are all here as well.